Is this a good order to accept, and is this actually a good amount of money to make? What's up, guys? Welcome to More Driven. On this channel, I talk all things DoorDash, Uber, Uber Eats, Lyft, Instacart, anything that has to do with gig work, I'm covering on this channel, and I'm just trying to help you guys make as much money as you can because I've been doing gig work for almost 6 years now. And in this video, I'm going to be going over how much DoorDash drivers actually make in 2024. And so we're going to be answering those questions that I mentioned at the very beginning. And then I'm going to be taking you through and showing you how much you can expect to be spending in expenses if you were to DoorDash full-time for a full year. And then at the very end, I'm going to be going over ways you can actually save thousands of dollars on those expenses. So is this a good order to take? It is $10 for 7 miles. Now, yes, I would say it is a good order to accept, but it's not exactly what it looks like on the surface. Because there are expenses that are associated with every single mile you drive as a DoorDash driver, what this order would actually be in profit is $7.40 for 7 miles, which makes it look a lot less appealing. Now, obviously that's going to vary depending on the car you drive, but I'm basing these numbers off of the car I drive, which is a 2016 Chevy Cruze, which gets about 30 miles per gallon, and that is city and highway miles combined. So I'm going to show you exactly how we get to that $7.40 number, but we're going to be doing it in a much broader sense. And that means we're going to be taking the overall money you would make throughout the entire year if you were a full-time DoorDash driver. I'm going to break it down for you. But first, let's talk about the immediate expenses that you can be calculating every single shift you do. So I'm just going to take the last DoorDash shift I did, which was my 12-hour earned by time shift. If you didn't see it, you can check it out. I'll link it up at the top for you. But it was a terrible shift. And so this is actually scary how bad the pay gets when you factor in expenses. So I made $126.55 in 12 hours, and I drove 232 miles during this shift. That means that I spent about $23.20 on gas because I usually spend about 10 cents per mile I drive. That's about what my car does. I mean, it depends on if I'm spending more time in the city or if I'm doing more long distance freeway stuff, but that's about the average, 10 cents per mile. So I highly recommend you figure out what that is for your car, and I'll actually explain the formula on how to do this later in the video. So anyway, $23.20 on gas, and then I would put away about 10% of whatever I made for the day towards wear and tear on my car. So that's $12. And then another 10% goes towards taxes, which is $12.60. So that means that the new total that I made after expenses in 12 hours was $78.75, which is an hourly average of $6.57 per hour. Just horrific. That is below minimum wage. So now let's get into the numbers of if you were to do this full-time for a year. Now, as a full-time DoorDash driver, you can probably expect to make $20 per hour. That seems to be the average that you can make. I mean, obviously it's going to depend on the market that you're in, but I think this is the average across America. And we're saying for the purposes of this video, you drove 1 mile per dollar you made. So if you were to work 40 hours a week, every single week, average $20 an hour, you'd make $41,600. And that would mean you drove 41,600 miles. So if you were to do those exact numbers and you had a similar car to me, fairly newer, average car that gets about 30 miles per gallon. And this is based off of gas being around $2.50 to about $3, somewhere in between there. So you would spend $3,640 on gas. And the way you get that number is you take the miles you drove, divide it by the amount of miles you can drive on a full tank of gas, and that will equal how many full tanks of gas you use up driving 41,600 miles, and then you just take that number and multiply it by how much your average spend is per tank of gas. Mine's about $35. So that's how I got that number. And then you can expect to spend about $1,000 on new tires. Now, if you're driving 41,000 miles, then you're probably going to have to change your tires out every single year. I would recommend getting the best of the best tires just because you don't want some great value tires on your car if you're driving this much. You want them to be able to last a long time. You want to be able to drive over something if you accidentally hit something and it to not pop immediately. So I get Michelin tires. They're fairly pricey, but it's been worth it in the long run. So that's about $1,000. Then the next expense is brakes and rotors, I think they're called. I'm not sure, but I just had to change these on my car and it ended up being about $500. And they also changed the brake fluid as well. So you can expect to do that about once a year. And then I spend about $50 every time I get an oil change. And if you're driving this many miles, I would highly recommend getting an oil change about every 3,000 to 5,000 miles. That's what it's recommended. That's what I do. And so you'd be getting about 10 oil changes throughout the year, which would be another $500 on oil changes. Next, you probably can expect to spend another $1,000 on miscellaneous things that go out on your car. Like I just had the AC go out on my car. I don't know how much that's going to be to fix, but other stuff goes out, like a coolant pump might break, or you might pop a tire, or anything like that just kind of happens all of a sudden. It's nothing you can really plan for, but it unfortunately does happen when you're driving this much. Or maybe you get in a little fender bender or something and you have to pay to fix that. So you can expect to spend about $1,000 on that stuff. And then last but certainly not least, actually the biggest expense would be taxes. And if you were to make this much and you used the standard mileage deduction for your write-off, then you would have to pay about $4,118. And that depends on the state you live in and some other things, but it would be around $4,118 in taxes. So that's a total of $10,758 in expenses. And so that means your total profit, working 40 hours every single week, averaging $20 an hour, would be only $30,842 or $14.83 per hour, which is pretty bad. Most jobs out there will pay better than this. So that's a sad reality when it comes to being a DoorDash driver in 2024. You really don't make that much money and you could find better income elsewhere, but you wouldn't have the freedom to work whenever you want and be your own boss. So there's definitely a trade-off. But if you guys want to do this for yourself and break down the math, then all you have to do it really quick is you can use the numbers I did, which would mean you just take 74% of whatever you're making, and that's the profit you make. So you can do that, or you can actually do the formula, which would be that formula I mentioned earlier. You figure out how much your average spend is on a full tank of gas, and then you take that number and divide it into how many miles you can drive on a full tank of gas. So for my instance, I usually pay about $35 per full tank of gas, and I can get about 400 miles out of it. So I just take 35, divide it by 400, and it costs me about 9 cents per mile I drive to run my car. And that's just in terms of gas. So then you could add on a couple extra percent to figure out the wear and tear and stuff. But that's a quick and simple way to do it, just in terms of how much you're actually profiting when you're only accounting for gas. Now I'm just gonna go over some ways you can decrease your expenses real quick. But before I get into that, I just wanted to mention, if you need an app to first of all, track your miles, or second of all, help you track your expenses, then I highly recommend you download the Solo app. They have a great expense tracker, and also tax season is coming up. You can file your taxes with them. They're just a great tool to have. If you haven't downloaded the app already and signed up for one of their plans, then I highly suggest you do it now. Just click the link down below in the description. When you sign up using that, you'll get a bonus $10, and that'll pay for like your first month on the basic plan. So it works out pretty good. If you're interested in that, you need an expense tracker, then you can go ahead and check that out. But some ways you can decrease your expenses and save quite a bit of money is if you were to get a Prius. Priuses get about 59 miles per gallon in the city and on the freeway. So their gas mileage is twice as good as mine, which means I would be spending half as much in gas. So just by getting a Prius, yes, the upfront cost would be a lot, but I would save about $1,820 in gas every single year that I owned a Prius instead of my car. Next, if you do your own oil changes, you can usually do them for about $30 depending on the car you have. So that'd be $20 that you're saving per oil change, which would be about $200 per year. Next, if you just drive more carefully, then you're less likely to hit a pothole or blow a tire or rear end someone or anything like that, anything that falls into the miscellaneous category. If you drive more careful, then you're going to reduce the risk of having to pay for those things. So that could save you anywhere from $100 to maybe the whole $1,000 for the year. And then lastly, if you pay an accountant or you file your taxes through an app like Solo or even like TurboTax, they can save you quite a bit of money. And so you probably won't have to pay that $4,000 I mentioned. If you go through an accountant or one of these things, you can save quite a bit of money. And I'm not sure on this, but you could probably cut your tax bill in half. And so you might save around $2,000. But by using these things, you can literally save thousands and thousands of dollars on your expenses, which really comes in handy. But anyways, there you guys have it. If you learned something from this video, subscribe. I hope you can take this and lower your expenses and start figuring out how much you're actually making as a DoorDash driver, because I know it really helps. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I'm trying to give you guys as much of my experience that I've gained over the past almost 6 years so that you can hopefully make as much money as possible. But yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate all the viewership, and I'll see you in the next video.